Well, welcome everyone to another episode of the More Than Able podcast. My name is Margie, and today I am joined by Megan. Megan comes from a large family with members who have unique abilities. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Uh, Today we're going to talk about her involvement with Special Olympics as well as her family. So, Megan, welcome to the show. Glad you could make it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I haven't done a podcast in a little while, so I'm super ready to talk about all of the different aspects and whatever you're looking to chat about. I'm so ready.
Awesome. So, one thing I didn't tell you beforehand was I like to start my podcast episodes with a game of Would You Rather. You in?
Yes, I'm so ready. I love this game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Megan, would you rather uncontrollably break into song or unexpectedly lose your voice?
You know, I love to sing. I do. But I also have a bad vocal cord. And I've always thought about what my life would look like if like my vocal cords just stopped working. And I really I've gotten comfortable with like both of, like that idea. And I love randomly breaking out into song. It's kind of a hard one because I honestly would be happy with either of them. I think for other people's sake, I don't think I have a great voice. I think I would rather just go silent, like saving other people from having to listen to me randomly break out into song. It's more of the other people being uncomfortable than me. So I'd probably just go quiet. I love listening to people. I love learning from other people. And sometimes I'm a gabber. I'm a yapper. I love to talk. So sometimes I need to work on not talking. So I feel like I would rather go silent and listen and learn than be the one talking or singing in this case, I guess. What about you? Do you have a preference?
Oh gosh. See, I'm the opposite. I
Oh,
would rather uncontrollably just break into song. In my family, we're always singing something, whether it's like a made up song or like we connect a song to how we're feeling. And
yeah.
so now let's learn more about you.
Oh my God.
So tell me about your family and how it came to be, other than the obvious.
Sure. So I grew up one of seven, but the structure of my family kind of goes back a little bit before I was born. My mom and my dad went through 12 years of infertility. And during that time, they had adopted three children from Greece. They all had varying degrees of heart defects. So they all had surgery operations here in the United States. And unfortunately, I lost my younger sister, technically older, would have been older, EOCOSTI from a heart condition and from heart surgery. But my other two siblings were successful and had very, very healthy lives. I still have both of them in my life. Very, very thankful for that. And during the 12 years, my mom just really was really gunning for pregnancy. She wanted to have that pregnancy experience. And so my parents had talked a little bit about IVF options and ultimately decided to go through with that process. And that's when they became pregnant with triplets. And the pregnancy overall was a little bit challenging, a little bit difficult on my mother, but it all came to a head a little bit later in the pregnancy where her placenta started to fail, which then caused a little bit of the lack of oxygen to the brain of the children. So all three of her children had some degree of disability, specifically cerebral palsy, and two of which are identical twins. And those identical twins are also on the spectrum. And then I was born 11 months later. And then my youngest brother was also born, oh gosh, maybe 16 months later. Like he was a 99, I was a 98, and the triplets were a 97. So like when I tell you in the yearbook, we took up a row at school. The Moffats were running the streets in Arnold's high school. So, but my youngest brother is also on the spectrum as well. He was diagnosed later in his life than the other three. And yeah, pretty much I grew up one of seven. I'm a middle child through and through. And from a young age, me and my sister, Jenni, were very, very close, not only because we were 11 months, close to each other in terms of age, but also just because we're both with the same person, into the glitzy, into the glam, into the makeup, just talk about boys. We're just very, very close in that way. So at a young age, having a sister with disabilities, you start to look at life a little bit differently. And so I started my advocacy journey, I guess I would say, realistically at 13, but even from a young age, I was feeding my sister and helping out and not even really understanding, not having a genuine thought as to why, but more just of a natural instinct of, oh, this is just how you do things. And this is just how we operate. It's very, very normalized. And so very, very thankful for my family. My family is insanely diverse, not only in just ethnicity and background and preferences and demographics, but also in ability. We have a wide span of abilities in my household, and it always keeps everything really fresh, and it keeps me learning, keeps me on my toes, and it's beautiful. I'm very, very thankful for my family. They're amazing.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That's amazing. So, when did you realize that your siblings had unique abilities?
That's a really great question. I think as a child, you just accept the world as it is. You're a sponge. Your brain is operating at such a high level that everything around you just seems as new and as normal as any other thing, or quote unquote typical. And so I really don't think that I acknowledged, quote unquote, that my siblings required different care or had different abilities for a hot second. That's a really great question. Hold on. Let me think about this for a
Yeah, of
second.
course. Take your time.
There is a transition period, I think, when you're a sibling with someone who has different abilities, who requires different care, where you start to talk about the impact on the communities around you, I would say. I probably had to be maybe 11 or 12 when I was really accepting and acknowledging that my siblings were a part of a different community than some of the other peers I was around at that age. So a little bit of background on me as well. I was homeschooled and then dropped into public middle school. So if you could believe it, I was a little bit of a mute growing up as well. I was a little socially awkward. It was a little bit weird. And so when I was dropped in, I would find myself skipping class to go and hang out with my sister and her friends in those classrooms. And at the time, there weren't any unified groups, which for anyone who's listening, unified means people with disabilities and without disabilities coming together, whether it's in clubs, in sports, in theater, in art programs. At the time in that public middle school, there were no opportunities for unified gatherings. And so I would just skip class and just hang out, just make up excuses. I would say I'm going to the bathroom. I'd be gone for 20 minutes and then I would come back into class like as if nothing happened. And I think at that time, I noticed, since I was in school with my sister and in school with my brothers, I noticed that other people around them were treating them differently. They were in smaller classrooms, kind of away in a darker corner of a school. They were seated at different tables in the cafeteria. Most of my friends didn't know I had siblings that were wandering the school along with us. And I think it was something that I recognized. And I think probably around 11 or 12, to answer your question, is when I quote unquote noticed that there was a difference in treatment. And therefore, people thought that my siblings were different than me. And I never associated myself as someone who is different than my siblings ever, probably up until that point. And then you start to notice it everywhere else. You start to notice it going out in public with people either staring or looking at them or talking to them differently when ordering at a restaurant. People ask me what my sister wants. My sister could speak for herself. My brother can speak for himself. And so you then start to pick that up. And then that natural advocacy piece that I think a lot of siblings with disabilities have starts to develop, because you notice the difference in treatment and you get a little protective. And that's when you start to educate yourself and start moving forward. So I would say that was a really big moment. I think the other moment that comes to mind is when my mother and I had a very honest conversation at a young age of what does the future look like for people with disabilities, and what are those opportunities looking like, and what is your role as a sister going forward to protect, to help, to guide, to also just interact and have fun in the future with your siblings. What does that realistically look like, and how does that differ from families that have people that are all able-bodied similarly? How does that differ, and how do we see that future differently? So I would say those conversations were happening around the same time that I was starting to notice that people were treating them differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to kind of put the question back on you a little bit without putting you on the spot, because I know
Okay.
it's a
Yeah,
no, I don't want to be on your toes.
sure.
But did you have a moment in your life where you felt like, oh, maybe I'm different than the other people around me? Like if the question onto me was, did you have a moment where you realized that your siblings were different? Did you feel like you had a moment where you're like, wow, maybe I am a little bit different?
Yeah. Growing up, um, I had some health conditions that I was in and out of the hospital for so many years of my life. And that included my elementary school years. And so it was hard to fit in sometimes. And then my peers would ask my teachers, like, why isn't Margie here today? Because I'd be in the hospital, or I'd be at getting tests done because something was wrong.
Sure.
And meeting my stepbrothers and everything, like I said, they have accepted me. My younger stepbrother and I are close. And so when I heard your story, um, and saw about your sister, which I want to get to her in a little bit, um, I was like almost mesmerized, like not in a creepy way, but I was like, all the posts I saw. Shout out to Lisa Hansen. Thank you
Yes.
for making the connection. We love you. Um, I was like, wow, this family is so interesting. And then when the opportunity kind of came for me to be like, okay, I want to interview a sibling of somebody, I immediately, like, I was literally laying in bed one night and I immediately thought of your family. I don't, and I never met you guys. Like, Jenni was at the high school and your brothers and you guys after I had already graduated, but I mean, I just kept seeing you guys all over Lisa's Facebook page and everything. And then when I heard um, the sad news about Jenni passing, it was just like, oh my gosh.
Mhm.
So, you know what? Would you mind talking about that a little bit
Oh,
about me and her passing? I'm so sorry
yeah.
that happened. I know it was a while ago.
No, yeah. It's very interesting. You have quite the timing. Something to know about my sister before, we really get into it. My sister loved being in the spotlight. She really liked to prove people wrong. She was physically disabled and she had a little bit of a hard time enunciating words, but she was bright as a bulb. And so she was funny. She was very joyful, very alive in every sense of enjoying life and being present. And she had such a way to draw people in and very, very popular. And so it's very funny. She was born on Easter Sunday, and Easter Sunday is not the same every year. So that's 2 days that we kind of think of her of just, oh, it's Easter and also her actual birthday. And then she passed away on Thanksgiving. which also is not the same every single year. So now we have the 23rd and Thanksgiving herself. So I always joke, I'm like, she was born with 2 days and she died with 2 days. Most people only get two total. She has four. She's really got the spotlight. And November, just because of it, is always a little bit of a tough month. So when you reached out and wanted to talk about it, my heart just melts. I'm humbled to be here. I love talking about her, and I don't get sometimes the opportunity to be able to do so. And I think some people feel uncomfortable talking about her passing around me because they don't want to make me cry, but I'll cry anywhere. It's okay. I'll cry in 20 years.
Of course.
Absolutely. I'm like, I'd rather people talk about her and keep her spirit alive and cry than have people start to forget and not share things. So I'm very thankful to be here. And I'm super excited. And whatever you want to know, I'm very, very open, because I think that the passing of her is very, very complicated. You've got the emotional side of what it actually, the impact on the community and on myself and on my family, especially on her triplet siblings. You have that aspect, but you also have the advocacy side of the medical aspect of the situation. And you also have the advocacy side of the legal aspect as well, with her death certificate and autopsies and the lack of autopsies on people with disabilities, and the writing off her passing as something related to her disability instead of maybe something else. There's that legal aspect as well. And so I'm happy to kind of go through a little bit of the story, and then truly whatever you would like to know or are interested about, we're open.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable sharing with me and with the listeners who are going to be listening to this, just the floor is yours.
All right. Let me get some water first.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll start here. Jenni was incredibly healthy. She was never hospitalized except for during surgery. She had, I think, a hip surgery and maybe some feet type surgeries just to help with comfortability in her wheelchair, and as she was growing and growing. Yeah. And so she was never hospitalized for any sort of flu, pneumonia. Whenever she was sick, she recovered just fine. She was very, very healthy and very happy, all good marks. She graduated high school in 2016, and she then started a transition program. Now, it's important to note that in this high school at this time, we had been on the cutting edge of unified programs being developed, both in the middle school that we belonged to and in the high school that we belonged to as well. The high school that we had gone to had the beginnings of a unified club. Again, people with disabilities and without disabilities coming together. And the unified club was more geared towards activities like games and little things like that. But by the end of high school, they had started a unified theater program, which brought people with and without disabilities together, and you pair up playing the same roles. So the first showing was Shrek, and she was Fiona. So she played Fiona, and then she had a partner who was involved in the regular educational program, and they together, working with their abilities, portrayed the characters. And so it was beautiful. So we started that. She's helped Lisa, I believe, with the beginnings of the art program as well, which brought in people making various different products and selling them as well. And so there was a lot going on, and she had such an amazing time in high school working and being with people without disabilities. And that also included in class as well. We had TAs that were in science classes. I mean, truly, it was very, very cutting edge. There were not a lot of high schools that were as unified as we were at the time, and we had tried in every capacity to build that. We did prep rallies in front of schools for homecoming together. I mean, absolutely bringing people who were otherwise more hidden in our schools out into the open and inviting the rest of the school in. And it was a beautiful time. With that being said, there was a huge stark contrast from that experience to going into transition. Transition was at a school, and she was mainly surrounded by people with disabilities. And I think it's important to note and highlight that the disabilities that she was surrounded by were people who were both physically disabled and had some mental disabilities as well. And she was not hanging out with anyone that also was not disabled. And she really was a bridge for so long between all the different abilities in all different walks of life coming together. So she, I think, started to feel like she was being hidden again. And I think that was really hard for her. So her other friends from high school, some of them went off to college and just left the state, started dating, going on spring break, doing all of those things. And that's, I think, when some of maybe the loneliness started to settle in, where honestly, I thought that maybe I might cry here. I'm so sorry. I
Also,
thought maybe I could be enough in that way, but I wasn't. And I was never really going to be. I'm a sister and I'm a friend. I'm a
mhm.
sister and a best friend. But she was much, much more than just me. She was much, much more than just the disability community and the community that she'd built. She was a bridge. And so, not having people on the other side, outside of family and outside of her community, Special Olympics, I think she did a pageant during that time as well. I think that she started to feel like, oh, is my future going to be cornered? And I'm only going to be existing in this small space because the rest of the world and the rest of my future is not unified. How do I make that happen? And it's difficult when you're seeing other people go off and have those experiences and you're not seeing potentially that bright future. So she was starting to experience some anxiety. And I think that we all can relate to that, especially in what, 18, 19 years old. There's
Yeah.
so much known already, let alone a young woman who has some different abilities, feeling like the world might be closing in on her and her spotlight being a little bit dimmed. And so she was experiencing some anxieties, and it was starting to kind of mess with the joy that she was used to portraying and the work that she was doing. And you could see she just wasn't as interested anymore. She was a little irritated. And then she kind of felt like she was misunderstood. There were lots of times where she was communicating and it wasn't sometimes clicking. And it all was building up over a course of a few months. And so, in full transparency, both her and some other guardians and parents and people in her life had decided that maybe going on some sort of medication to maybe help the anxiety would be the best route. Medical professionals thought that that was also potentially a great option considering these transitions, and it was not successful. Jenni was not herself. It almost calmed her too much where it numbed her out, where like now she wasn't feeling anything. Very, very sensitive. People very quickly realized this is not the right route. We decided to go off the medication, and then we started to see a couple of interesting symptoms going off the medication. She was waking up like sweating at night. There were just some really weird responses. And then about a week and a half later, she was in the hospital and acting very unlike herself. She almost was mentally not even really clicking in. I would ask her questions and she couldn't give me a proper answer. She was not sleeping. She was very irritated and unwell, but then sometimes she'd be very happy and would feel fine. Like we called a good friend of ours who lives out in California, and she was completely fine. And then another friend of ours visited her, and then it was just completely not fine. And it's very odd because she's a very loving person and always wants to see everyone. If every day she could have a visitor, she would say yes. So very unlike her to be so hot and cold. Doctors ran multiple tests. She was in the hospital for about 2 days, maybe 3 days. And I was with her on the final night in the hospital. It was just us two. And the doctor came in after us pretty much not sleeping all night. My mother hadn't slept, so she went home. I think my sister was out in med school at the time. My father had gone home as well. We have, again, big family, other people, and the holidays were coming up. It was about Thanksgiving. So that final night before Thanksgiving, she really didn't sleep. We were up all night, just having a hard time. And that morning, the doctor came in and said, she really doesn't have anything. We did notice that she does have strep throat though. So here's an antibiotic to treat it. And unless you feel like her health is at risk, you should probably just go home, get some sleep, see how she responds after the strep throat is healed. And then if there's still some behavioral issues, or if there's still just some problems that are happening, let's address them after some sleep. And I couldn't agree more. Jenni didn't like to be in hospitals in general. No one likes to be in hospitals. And I don't know a single person who wants to be in a hospital ever. And it's Thanksgiving. She loved the holidays. She's a big eater. She loved to eat. So, like, let's get some pumpkin pie. Let's get some mashed potatoes. Let's just go home, go sleep. So we went home. It was a very odd Thanksgiving. My mom usually cooks for a few days leading up to prep, but really didn't have the time. And after dinner, I left to go and visit a friend who unfortunately was working on Thanksgiving. And I wanted to check in with her since she couldn't be with family. And she went to bed. And about an hour and a half after she went to bed, she was unresponsive. So I sped home aggressively since I was the last person that was with her at the hospital. And medical EMTs and the emergency medical team was asking about what she was on and if they gave her any other medications or if other things were talked about by the doctor. And there really wasn't much to say other than an antibiotic. So she was then transported to the hospital where they decided to no longer provide CPR. And on Thanksgiving of 2017, she passed away. It was very, very difficult, very unexpected, very confusing. And so her time in her high school, excuse me, her time in her high school was very beautiful, and it was jam-packed with just great experiences. And I like to remember her as that Jenni instead of the Jenni in transition. Her classmates overwhelmingly were filled with other people who were medically very sensitive. Mm-hmm. So during her time from elementary to even transition, people were concerned that other classmates of her would potentially pass during that time because of their sensitivity and their medical fragility. Mm. And so breaking the news to the disabled community that she had passed was not only just a major shock, but mass confusion as well, understandably so, because her class had so many people who were fragile. No one thought that Jenni would be the first person out of her class to pass. Right. And yeah, now it's what, 2024. So it's 7 years this Saturday, which is crazy because it still feels like yesterday to me. It's very fresh.
Of course.
You don't always be fresh though, you know?
Yeah.
That's natural.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm like over here trying not to cry.
You're racist.
Be a professional here.
It's okay to cry though. I love crying. Honestly, it's amazing. I tell that to everyone.
Therapeutic.
Beautiful. Crying is beautiful. It is.
It is. So, let's move on to Special Olympics.
Yeah, for sure.
What is a positive experience with your family that you can share with the listeners, like as far as your Special Olympics experience?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much. I love Special Olympics. I really do. I like to say that I worked for them, but I also know that I was an intern, unpaid with my brother, and I literally asked for it to not be paid. I'm like, I'd rather just keep the money in the organization. So let me think about. I've worked for them. I've done so much work. So Special Olympics has been on my radar for a very, very long time. When I was in middle school and we were creating, quote, unified programs at the time, I did not realize that those unified programs were similar to the ones that Special Olympics was pushing in unified school. So just to give you an idea, Special Olympics is more than just athletes. I think a lot of people think it's just athletes. It's not. We have healthy athletes, which is all about health and wellness. We do leadership classes at Athlete Leadership University, which is a yearly university opportunity where people go to Bethel to take leadership classes. I have taught a few, I have attended a few. They're amazing. Love them. There's also lots about advocacy and about um, educating how to advocate for yourself, whether that's in the sense of like civil in legal aspects of your rights in Minnesota versus other places. I mean, there's so much going on with this organization. And one of their big things as well is champion schools, which just basically means how do we take these schools that are in our areas and we make them more unified in every single way possible. And that also includes unified groups that get together that aren't surrounding just sports. It could be classrooms, it could be in after school programs, it could be any of these types of things. And they have different goals for these schools to become a champion school. So at the time, the middle school that we had attended was not a champion school. And I don't know if it was really on their radar to become a champion school, but the programs that we started back then, Jenni and I, and a couple of others as well, shout out to the unified groups. They are still here today. They are still active. They are so full that they have a wait list for everyone to get in, which is amazing. And yes, woo! And now it has become a unified champion school. And so has the high school that we have gone to as well, which is just beautiful. So in a way, I've been involved since I was 11, but I really didn't know that what I was doing was aligning with Special Olympics mission until a little bit later. Jenni competed in Special Olympic sports. Patrick competed a little bit. We even, I think in high school, I think I was maybe a sophomore or junior, we had one heat that started like a heat, like a, come on, what's it called? Track and field,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so my brother Patrick started it. And then he passed the baton over to me. And then I ran and I picked up Jenni. And then Jenni and I finished together at the end of it. So I mean, that was amazing. I had so much fun that day. I remember I got to skip school and skip class. I was super amped. And then to be able to close out the whole event, that was the last heat that we had for the entire day. And we ended it and I loved it. It was amazing. Jenni, I would say, was a little bit more involved than Patrick at the time. Patrick was a sideline guy. He was more homebody, reading and staying at home. But for a couple of different events, he had come to either support Jenni or to also get involved. So after Jen had passed, Patrick had joined the student board of directors, I believe, with also Lisa Hansen. I think she was the one that pushed him to take over that spot and to start learning those skills. So after that point, we had attended Athlete Leadership University, where we took global messenger classes. Those are classes to teach people both, of all abilities on how to give presentations and how to publicly speak to draw in attention and to draw in interest and inspiration. How do you inspire people who are listening to get up and start moving and start acting and being better, or taking away something and making the world a better place. So we had taken those classes, which was amazing, super fun. If you ever have the opportunity to do Athlete Leadership University, please go and do it. It's amazing. And you stay on campus and you get to eat in the cafeteria and you meet so many people. It's a great opportunity. So we did that. And then we had started off at a unified internship position. And we had worked, I think it was a couple days in the office each week. And we helped plan Athlete Leadership University for that following year. So that could be doing things like we designed a water bottle. I don't have the water bottle with me. I'll send a picture. It's cute. Designed a water bottle as like an incentive item. We had done gifts for all the deans, for the people who taught the classes. We would go around and make sure everyone was having a great experience. And it was a ton of fun. And I think at the next Athlete University after that one, COVID had hit. So we had offered up athlete leadership classes online where Patrick and I unified taught a leadership class, and that was super fun. We made it like very exciting. It was a great time to be able to provide something different in the routine, especially during COVID. I think it isolated a lot of people. And so it was a great time to be able to get everyone on a Zoom call and learn some leadership skills, learn how to advocate for yourself, especially during COVID and during that time, but then also just have a good time and just enjoy yourself and connect. And so now since then, I volunteered for the Special Olympics USA Games 2 or 3 years ago in Florida had an absolute blast. I worked with the marketing and media team. So worked with ESPN, worked with all sorts of other like camera crews, but then I also just helped other parents make sure that they got to the right fields to watch, their athletes go and compete. I think I watched someone from Minnesota deadlift like 700 pounds. I don't know, some crazy number. I mean, we had incredible talent. I had such a fun time. It was also at Disney. Who doesn't love going to Disney?
Of course.
So had a great time. And now this year, the Special Olympics USA Games, so the whole United States Games, is being hosted here in Minnesota in 2026, which is insanely exciting. Special Olympics Minnesota has been doing so much work to get prepared and to be ready. And I myself am just so ready to dive in. Leading up to that, I have helped with user experience testing on an application for the USA Games. The USA Games has their own application that they give to athletes, to loved ones, to fans, to be able to access schedules, to understand where certain tents are, because again, it's so much more than just athletics. So to really get them engaged in the actual event. And so I help out with some of the user testing on some of that to be able to make the app a little bit more accessible and better for our athletes and for our fans and the people attending. And then on top of that, I'm working on a little quiet hush hush project here. It's a little hush hush, but I'm working on another application with Special Olympics Minnesota that focuses in on training, mental health, and nutrition for our athletes as well. And so we are in the process of doing all sorts of stuff. So there's crazy stuff happening behind the scenes. I'm always involved, even when I'm busy, and I might not be physically there. I'm around. So we love Special Olympics, but if we're looking for also a specific moment, I know I'm yapping here, but we're looking for one specific moment. I think my favorite Special Olympics moment, this is going to be very, very funny, but my sister was competing in a track and field race, and for her track and field races, she used a walker that would help support her balance so that she could push her. And she was not looking to win. Like, she definitely could have gone a little quicker to win. She didn't care to win. She was the last to finish because she wanted to strut and look up at the stands and wave and do kind of a princess walk. And it was the funniest thing. I have a video of it because my sister oftentimes, when she would be in that walker, she would kind of have her head down. It's just the way that the walker is set up. It didn't support her upper body as much as her lower body. So sometimes she'd be a little bit more forward. So when she would practice at home and we would walk around our lake where we used to live, she would kind of have to look down, but she was standing up and strutting like she owned a runway. It was the funniest thing. So I think that was my favorite Special Olympics moment. Was it highlighted that all of these athletes, they're superstars. They are. And they are allowed to have their moment, and they should. And we should shine light on everyone, regardless of performance, regardless of any of that. These athletes are working hard. They're making a statement. They're there to advocate. They're there to lead. And Jenni was leading that day, not in first place, but leading in advocacy and smiling and waving, knowing that she had every recognition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that probably is my favorite Special Olympics moment. Looking back, there's a lot of them, but that one's probably my favorite.
Oh, so great. Thank you for sharing. Do you know the Special Olympics athlete oath by heart?
Yeah. Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. A beautiful oath, in my opinion. Yes, we love it. We love it. We can never forget it. I mean, when I was working there, I think it was painted on the wall. I think everyone would be incredibly disappointed in me if I couldn't say it. But it's such an inspirational quote. It's such an inspirational oath. And when you look back, Eunice Kennedy Shriver had founded Special Olympics, I think that in the 1970s. Again, so sorry if those dates are slightly wrong, but she had founded it, and she is such a pivotal key player. And I don't think that she realized what she was doing. I mean, it impacted the world. It impacted the community in such a profound, deep way, that continues to grow. It's there's no stopping it. It's such a force. The community is such a force. And every single year, I think that there's more people that have eyes on them, that are paying attention, that are learning, that are engaging. And I think that oath really wraps up, let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. Every single day, the community is living by that. It's not just, I'm going to go out and try to win this baseball game, or I'm going to try to beat everyone in track and I'm going to try to be an athlete. It's every single day, these athletes and everyone who's involved in the community is saying that every day, if we cannot win this day, navigating this world, we're being brave in the attempt because we are evolving it forward. And I think it's perfection. It's beautiful. It's honestly, it's like my own oath every single day. I feel like when I'm up and moving, and I think everyone of the athletes and people who are at Special Olympics would agree that it's something that's more than just an oath for sports.
My last question is, what would you like people to know about your family or Special Olympics that you haven't already shared?
Great one.
Or even about people with disabilities.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'm going to answer it as if the audience member listening here is not involved with people with disabilities. I'll be completely transparent. My current boyfriend, he's a doctor, and he came to me and said, the first person I've ever met with disabilities is your brother. I've never met someone with disabilities before that.
Gosh.
You're a doctor. How have you not interacted? And maybe you've interacted and you just haven't noticed that there's more people that are disabled that are around you or have different needs or different abilities. But I think the people that are surrounded in my life, most of my friends do not have a family member who has a different ability or has different needs than them. And they have all given me the feedback of, you've made it so normal, because I didn't think it was normal. And I was like, but it is normal. I didn't make it normal. This is life. This is normal. And I think I would tell people who aren't involved in the community, who are, I don't know about their history, and I don't know how to communicate, or I don't know anyone, or I feel uneducated, go to an event, go as a fan, go watch a Special Olympics sport, go volunteer, go ask questions, do some Google searches. The internet's a beautiful place. I follow so many creators who all have different abilities that talk openly about their experiences, especially for women who are on the autism spectrum. Autism was something that was mainly researched on men. And so women tend to have slightly different experiences and can be underdiagnosed. Lots of stories of women finding out that they're actually on the spectrum later in life and getting that diagnosis as well, and what that means to them. You have parents that have podcasts. You have podcasts. You can easily tune into these conversations, and Special Olympics or these podcasts, these different creators that were online, art. There's so much art from people with disabilities. I just read a story about a guy selling hot sauce. I'm going to be buying hot sauce from that guy. I don't need to buy my hot sauce from Target anymore. I can go and buy it from someone who has a passion for hot sauce and is also making a huge statement at the same time saying, yep, I'm disabled and I'm making hot sauce and I'm really passionate about it. And this is what I do. We can support that. You can tune into these things. I think that sometimes there's some ignorance of just, there's no one in my life and I don't understand it, so I'm just not going to tune in. And I just disagree wholeheartedly. I think that you're closing yourself off from so many beautiful experiences, so many beautiful stories, so much learning, so much community, so much fun. Like I had said, like I used to skip class and I would just hang out in my sister's classes with all of our friends. And I felt way more comfortable being in there than with some other people. And some of my favorite memories growing up were with these people. And I'm like, why aren't you tuning in? This is I'm having so much fun over here. Welcome in. Just show up. Just go ahead and give it a shot. Welcome. Let's go.
Come
What?
on, let's go. Yes.
Absolutely. And so I would say that if I'm speaking to that type of person, just tune in. Don't deny yourself some joy in your life. Come and join the community. I think it's great. I think the other thing too that I would say in terms of family, specifically with family units, I'm very, very thankful to have the family that I have. I rely on all of them for so much. If I'm having a hard day, I call up my brothers, or especially my sister was around. She was my rock. If I was having a bad day and I needed to cope with something, she was part of that process, which I think was one of the hardest things when she did pass, was trying to figure out how to navigate hardship without her. But I think for other families, specifically families with children with disabilities, or if you're a sibling with disabilities as well, I think that sometimes when that's new, there's this overwhelming message of, I'm sorry, you are pregnant with a child with disabilities, and you give birth to a child with disabilities, and the doctors say, I'm sorry, because your child is quote unquote not perfect up to our standards, right? They're not healthy to our standards, whatever that is. Your child may not do XYZ. Your child may struggle with XYZ. And to some extent, it's important medically to be able to talk about what that path might look like. However, the undertone of I'm sorry, I think really does a disservice to this community. And I think there was a moment series, which was a Special Olympics series talking about the moment people joined the unified movement. And there was one, I believe her name was also Megan, who did the congratulations movement, where instead of saying, I'm sorry that your child is disabled, you say congratulations to those new parents and to that new mother. And I think there's something really strong about that community. Most families that have someone with disabilities, quote unquote, did not plan on having someone with disabilities. They might not know someone with a disability, do not know what services look like, do not know what future looks like, does not understand, like, what do I even do? How do I even proceed? And then you end up relying on a friend or another family member who might have someone who knows someone who has a disability, and you're kind of working backwards. And I would tell those people, congratulations, your life is different and it's beautiful, and don't be afraid of it.
Right.
And it's completely normal to be a little unsure, but you've now just been invited into such a beautiful community with so much love and support. You have no idea how great your life is going to become. And I wish for the future that it flips, where someone gives birth to a child with disabilities and says, oh, I know what this can look like, or I understand what this means. And I have the tools and the knowledge and the grounding to be able to embrace this and have joy within this right out the gate. And so I don't really know if that answered your question completely.
No,
big question.
That was beautifully said.
Thank you. That's what I would probably say is so much cooler than people think. Like, I want to keep the community to myself. Don't get me wrong. Like, I want my community, and I'm selfish. I want it all to myself, but we need to do better. We can grow this so that our lives are just naturally unified. And I think that we're on that trajectory. We just need a couple more big speakers, and podcasts like this is exactly how we get there. You get people talking about it, you get people listening in, you start having those real conversations.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Megan, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing your story and your family's story. And like she said, join Special Olympics. If you want to learn more, just go online, Special Olympics Minnesota, or wherever you're at, and do it. You've got nothing to lose.
Do it right now.
All right. Yeah. Well, Megan, thank you so much again for being on the show, and have a great day. And just remember, everybody, you are more than able.